Thank you so much for tuning in to an episode today of my show, William Wallis for America. Doing a little bit earlier than I usually do because I got somebody on that I think you'll be really interested in meeting today. He's got some really good information. We're going to do a quick 30-minute interview or so with him, and I'll get him on right now. His name is Craig Huey. Craig, how are you doing today? I really appreciate you coming on today with me.
William, it's great to be with you. I'm doing great and can't wait to we get into some of the issues.
Well, I tell you what, it's very interesting. When I saw all that you have to talk about, it really did. I mean, we're gonna have a hard time covering 30 minutes, but I think it's gonna be a slam pat good 30 minutes. So let's get to it. What's your experience in, and how did you get started on your quest to do your part to save America and bring American values to the forefront?
Well, I've been involved in this a long time, and I've had a particular interest in economics, and economics took me on the road to understanding some of the economic greats from the past. A man named Ludwig von Mises and von Hayek, and then Milton Friedman, a little bit about 30 years ago, and from that, I developed understanding of geopolitics, understanding of business. I've been a business owner. I own several different companies, won many awards for the type of jobs that we do. And during this time, I've been trying to educate and inform people about what's going on and how we can make it right.
What was your flip? What was it? What was the moment that you can say you said you wanted to go from your business experience and being an entrepreneur to using that experience to be more political? What was your flip or your tipping point, as some people would say?
Well, I saw how government was making it impossible to run a business or start a business. As an entrepreneur, I was able to start my company in an economic environment that was a recession, so that you would think it'd be impossible to move ahead. But because we had so little taxes, so little regulations, I was able to be free to try to provide product and service in the marketplace, even when the odds were against it. And if I were to try to start my business today, I wouldn't have ever made it. And the fact is I see government growing stronger and stronger. I started getting more involved, saying as government grows and becomes big, the individual shrinks and becomes small. Our individual liberty and rights are being eroded, and that this had to be stopped. So I started getting more and more involved in the political area. And instead of just watching it and then watching it and complaining about it, I got involved in watching and actually wanting to do something about it. And so during that time, I got involved in political action. I got involved in campaigns. I got involved in understanding what turns elections, and then where people really need to have some information and some ideas. And excuse me. And so from that, completely changed. Yes.
Would you say that, when you first started your business?
Yes.
And I'm not going to try and guess how long it is based on how you look. Okay. Yeah. Would you say that when you first started your business, our economy was more free? Raw capitalism was more prevalent. Our free markets were more free. So were you? And so that's one question. But the second one to follow up with that is, would you say that you learned a lot of good business tactics and a lot of good business techniques during those times to be able to help? And that's the second question, and to help you survive the third question, which is, did those techniques from those time periods help you survive now when we are not as free and where government is really putting more of a stranglehold, if you will, on businesses? Can you define that? Can you answer those three questions?
Well, William, what basically happened was that I found that I could apply my business knowledge and understanding of what makes a business run and what can destroy a business to the economic realm and economic policy. And so over the years, I saw government putting out of business different clients of mine, making it impossible for them to operate. And so as we enter into the age of President Obama, that's where on the state level and the national level, the changes were so dramatic in our economic structure and economic policies. And so I started giving speeches. I started talking about issues of inflation and issues of recession and issues of how to grow an economy. And then I started noticing something very interesting. I noticed that as one of my companies is an advertising agency. And so I've learned the how to market and advertise for clients nationwide. I've taken small businesses or people with ideas and turned them into multimillionaires. And as I've taken a look at this, I saw that Obama and his ingenious team of advisors and marketing professionals were actually doing something that the conservatives and the Republicans and the libertarians and the Christians had no clue about. They were using some of the most advanced strategies and techniques and applying it to politics.
Wow.
And as I saw this and learned this, I started seeing where the gaps were and why they were able to win elections. And while conservatives said, oh, we're going to win, that they were losing.
Yeah, conservatives tend to feel like their policies are so good, you know, and they're such the good guys that how could they lose? And they just they play the game or the election game simply on we're the good guy, we got better ideas, whereas the other side learns how to get out the vote, how to get out there regardless of their policies. They've learned how to get their electorate out, how to register people on their side and get their electorate out. And because we keep going, scratch our heads, well, our policies are better. We don't have debt. We don't do, and they just keep winning elections. And we keep thinking that the tide is turning against us when the fact is they've just learned how to win the election game. And I'll leave that one right there. You said your one business is in advertising. What are your other businesses in, just to kind of get an idea of your experience?
Publishing and venture capital, equity crowdfunding, that type of thing.
Okay, well, when we end our conversation today, I'm going to talk to you off camera for a minute on that. I see that one of your things that you like to talk about is deep state, and that you've got some surprising dangers that everybody should know. How many dangers could there possibly be, and what do you say about that? I don't know.
Well, I've given a lot of speeches and interviews about the deep state abuse of power, deep state corruption. And most people think in terms of the deep state as involving the federal government, which indeed, of course, it is. And right now, we're on the tip of exposing some deep state activity with the FBI and the CIA and the Homeland Security and many of these agencies. Basically all the agencies right now have been involved in different types of ways of abusing their power. And so my book kind of outlines how that's done, how it transformed, because really when you get down to it today, the bureaucracy in the past used to be something where, the bureaucrats would be hired because they were professional in their field. The bureaucrats, their number one thing was not to rock the boat, to make sure nobody criticized them, make sure that their job was secure, that they would never be fired. The bureaucrats would try to stay under the radar, and with the bureaucrats, it was more in line with what has been throughout history. Throughout the history, there's been a bureaucratic structure. Well, today, basically, we have a government, massive government, of bureaucrats who are not like these type of bureaucrats from the past, because under Obama and then fighting against Trump and then again rising again with President Biden, the bureaucrats add one thing. They don't want accountability. They get a job that they may not be skilled in, they have no knowledge of, but they're in that for life. But here's the other thing, William. They're ideologically driven. They want to transform culture and economics and society. And they want to use the government to do that transformation. And they don't want to use legislation. They don't want to use the president trying to make an initiative. They certainly don't want to do it in the elections. They want to do it under the radar. And that's exactly what's happening. And so the book talks about how the federal government bureaucrats do this. It also goes into alliances it has with media, social media.
No, which book is that?
That's my Deep State book.
And that one can be found on which website that we have here, Roland?
That can be on either of those two websites, craighuey.com. You can see the Deep State book. You can get the book on Amazon. You can get the book on Kindle, and you can get it at craighuey.com. And that book will tell you how nonprofits and others are involved in this as well. But the main thing is this: the deep state is something that everybody has to understand, because it's one of the great things that's going on now with this new Congress is that it's being investigated. It's going to be examined from a variety of different angles. And I'm excited about what it's going to expose, what it's going to reveal, because, William, when you dig into how taxpayers' money is being used for political purposes, for partisan purposes, but also mainly ideological purposes, it's sickening and it's destructive to America.
You know, you brought up something interesting. When you talked about bureaucracy, and you talk about and in the same sentence as the deep state. You know, I regularly talk about bureaucracy in America as what's really destroying our country, because what happens is these elected officials come up with narratives to be able to get laws passed that you know, keep them in office or back up their narratives. But the end result is that it always ends up growing government agencies. It grows bureaucracies. And look, I don't want to be negative against the people that are in bureaucracy, because a lot of them are just taking jobs. A lot of them are, hey, this job's available, I'm qualified, I can work for the government, I can get my 20 years, I can retire, I get, you know, a month paid vacation, I get sick leave, I get, you know, and they take it for the benefits. But what happens to our country is we spend a lot of money in the meantime funding all these deep levels of bureaucracy, AKA in some cases, the deep state. And then we end up funding them for the rest of their lives, because once they retire, they're getting that money. It goes into the unfunded liabilities of our country. So before, during, and after this whole process, our country's going into debt because of the narratives and the politicians creating bigger layers of government. Is that kind of all connected in your book to the deep state?
It is connected, and really gives clarity to how it's done and why it has to radically change. There has to be accountability. There has to be a sense that these government officials, if they abuse their power, they do something wrong, they can be fired. That if they don't do their job, if they're simply pushing paper and getting a paycheck, as a business owner, I can tell you, I don't allow that to happen.
Exactly, because as a business
owner,
it
does not happen with government.
And I didn't let you finish answering your whole question, but you're advertising, publishing, and was there anything else?
Yes, we help companies raise capital.
Yep. Okay. So the reason I'm re-emphasizing that, there's a reason for that, because you're very in tune with not only operating a business, but other people's business and the money and the amounts of money that's involved to get the job done. And that's why I wanted to re-ask that question a little bit to re-emphasize it. So how many, and you don't have to tell us how many, I mean, you don't have to tell us what they are. How many surprises do you show in your deep state book?
Well, I concentrate on 15 things that people really don't know about, but they should. And I go into the detail of how it happened and why it's wrong. I go into what's going on with the military and the wokeness we're finding in the military. I go into the Department of Education and the corruption of the Department of Education. You know, basically you have a bureaucracy that really is at war with freedom, at war with the American past, American history. It's at war with basically the Constitution. So we have a bureaucracy, again, that has an ideology, and it's so pervasive, so that as President Obama was hiring people just before he left office, one of the things that he did is on the executive branch, he created a organization of people who help hire bureaucrats, and he put his people in charge. He also did some rules and changes in the government law, so you couldn't fire as many people as you were able to do in the past. So when Trump came in, he had very limited ability of who to put in to office, unlike what past presidents have had. And then beyond that, he had a group of people who, and I talk about the different organizations like Indivisible, that were the bureaucrats who, undetected by almost everyone, were communicating in a way to subvert and destroy any policies, any plans, any actions that the different Trump administrators were trying to do. So if they were in the Interior Department, they had a revolt of the bureaucracy. If they were in the Department of Transportation, they had a revolt on anything that they tried to do. Leaks to the press, distortions of what was happening. They would try an initiative, but nothing would happen. And it was a revolt of these bureaucrats. And then when Biden comes into place, he had a team of bureaucrats ready to hire immediately with an agenda that was already in place. And today that agenda has been worked out. And not only that, now that the Republicans have taken over the House, William, what most people don't understand is that the House needs the Senate and the president to sign a bill. But the House can do a lot of damage control, financial stuff to prevent the massive government overspending that's spiked inflation. It can do some really great investigations. It can do some very good stuff.
So I want to stop you before I get too far away from a question that is important. Something you said a few minutes ago. You know, when you talked about bureaucracy and freedom. Of course, freedom is my favorite thing to talk about on my show. But I always got to wonder when you hear about all these different plans or these different ideas that people have on who's destroying our country and who's taking or eroding our freedoms. I always have to wonder who benefits from it. And you made a point to say something about bureaucracy and freedom in the same sentence, which sparked a thought or a question. I'll say, do you think that bureaucracy needs, I don't want to say any eradication of freedom, but does bureaucracy need control of the average citizen's freedoms in order to perpetuate itself or even to thrive? Is there somebody that's in charge of that level of bureaucracy that says, hey, we need to get rid of freedom? Either they go hand in hand, or does one need the elimination of the other?
It gets a little complex because, William, first of all, there's a lot of self-interest involved. So you get the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, and you've got big pharma trying to influence the FDA. That's self-interest. That's happened throughout the ages. But again, now we have an FDA that has more of an ideological agenda. And we also have other bureaucracies. And as they have an ideological agenda, they do not understand freedom as we know it. They don't understand that our rights are given from God. They don't understand the idea of the First Amendment rights, for example. Here we have a massive effort on behalf of almost every bureaucracy in the last 2 years to promote censorship with private companies. In some cases, implied intimidation, and others, just a lot of pressure, but also to be able to make it an ideological censorship on Twitter and Facebook and Google and these other platforms. And that this type of thing is contrary to the understanding that in a democracy, you need a freedom of the press. In a free society, you have to have a competition of ideas. The competition of ideas, usually when something comes out, when there's an idea, a concept, a program, if you just go with one opinion that this is going to work, and then you don't have criticism of it, the flaws, the problems with it are never identified, and it continues on. And so that is the nature of something that's bureaucratically driven. And so we see this, in the case of the COVID controversies. We see it in the cases of right now in economics. We have the Department of Labor trying to make it so there's not having any non-compete clauses. We have the Department of Labor saying a business owner cannot hire an independent contractor. Well, that's taking away the freedom of the business owner,
exactly,
and destroying the foundations of a free society at the same time.
Because business owners need that flexibility in hiring, and not only that, but you brought up an excellent point there, Craig. When a lot of these subcontractors that businesses hire are either immigrants or they're minorities.
Yes,
they're people that might be socioeconomically, in a different category socioeconomically. Maybe they are not skilled, or maybe they're not college. We'll say college degreed. Maybe they're skilled in a labor that they're best suited, not working for somebody else, or just the fact that some businesses can't have somebody full time. They can't make that full time commitment.
Yeah.
So when you're, to your point, when government breaks that, when they create a barrier and they break that ability for a business to hire a subcontractor, they're basically hurting the market. They're hurting individuals, and they're hurting the people who need it the most.
Terribly. And you nailed it, William. And here's the thing. That's a very personal issue to me. That's just one of the issues I faced in California. So as I started my business in California, and I was able to grow it in California. But along comes government, chipping away at freedom. And one of it was, since 30 to 40% of an ad agency's employees are usually independent contractors, and that's what I had, people who wanted to work independently, did not want to be employees. I would have emergency accounts. I would have special projects where I had to have a team of people come in. It wouldn't make sense to have an employee. And then in California, because of frivolous lawsuits, you don't want to have employees. So they passed a bill in California that is the prototype for this national bill that the Biden administration is trying to impose outside of legislation, that says you can't have an independent contractor. And what that did, it made it so I had to move. And so I moved to the free state of Tennessee.
I love it.
Regrets. I've saved enough money in 1 year over all the costs and mandates I had to pay in California and frivolous lawsuits that were nonstop. I was able to save that in Tennessee. But I did not want to move. I didn't want to have to move my employees. I didn't want to have to let some go who did not want to move. It was the government that imposed something that was something I could not live with and other businesses couldn't live with. That's why 5.5 small businesses a week leave California, and huge corporations like Oracle and Tesla and Nissan and Toyota have left California.
And that's what happens when we take the California business model of people leaving California, and they're trying to implement a lot of those same rules and regulations on a national level.
Right.
It's almost like California is the petri dish. It's the test market. It's the we're going to see what it can do here, and they see it's destroying it, but they just don't care. I really sometimes believe that it's not that they're not smart. It's that they realize what they're doing, and it's intentional. You destroy an economy, you destroy businesses. Government steps in with the solution and once government steps in with the solution, once they get control, there's no getting it back. Then they're producing the products, they're running the market. And I almost believe that that's the transition, which goes back to the bureaucracy, where sometimes I go, who in the world thinks of these, cockamamie ideas? And I realize it's these levels of bureaucracies hired by or created by politicians, hired by politicians, hired by other levels of government. And look, God bless them, if that's how to say it. I don't want to criticize a lot of these people, because a lot of these people were just job seekers that that's something they're passionate about, not seeing the bigger picture of what it's doing to our country, what it's doing to individuals, but what it's doing to freedom and liberty. On this side. And I want to go, because I know you don't have a whole lot more time, and I have a few more questions to ask you, especially some of my favorite ones. But you've got something called the Christian Voter.
Yes.
There's some kind of, what is that about?
Well, I wrote the Christian Voter book because some 40%, 30 to 40% of the people in any evangelical church, they're not registered to vote. And like in this last midterm election, 50 to 60% who were registered did not vote. And then most pastors completely ignored it. Yet what we have found is that 86% of the evangelical Christians vote conservative. So probably the fastest, best way for any candidate to win an election is to be able to know how to communicate to the evangelical Christian. So I came up with 12 non-negotiable issues that most every evangelical will agree with, that is contrary to the socialist secular policies of the liberals. And at the same time, I talked about things like how to strategically limit evil, how to be able to do church ballot harvesting, how to be able to mobilize the church to get out the vote. And so it's partially a biblical critique on America, its foundation, about the Christian principles of voting, about current issues from a biblical worldview, and then an action plan of what to do.
It's interesting. You say that there's 30 to 40% of Christian church-going people that are not registered to vote.
Right.
Although when you think about how a church is a nonprofit and they cannot talk politics, part of that, and of course I'm surmising, but imagine, if you will, if we unwound that and a church was able to talk politics, even with or without, maybe they just say, hey, look, I'm going to give up my 501c3 status because we're talking politics. And they actually engaged with their congregation to be registered to vote and motivated them to vote and be more involved. Do you think that we could turn the tide? Do you think that would be a real unique twist? I mean, think about this. I'm tying this with your book.
So, William, I think it can be done without changing the IRS law. So the Johnson Amendment was the one that basically said that churches would be considered illegal if they talked about politics. Trump suspended that provision, because most constitutional scholars say if it ever went to court, it would be found unconstitutional. But beyond that is it's pretty much ignored by the IRS. So the Democrats, the Democrat socialists have concentrated on certain churches, especially the Black inner city church with souls to the polls, and to be able to have Black churches open up to the Democratic politicians. I see that's changing. I see the Hispanic churches growing that are conservative, and they're growing at a very large pace, and they are more free to talk about politics because they usually have come from a Cuba or Venezuela or a country like that. And so they love freedom, and they hate to see what's happening in America. They are they're pro-life. They're for religious liberty. They're for the persecuted church worldwide. And so they are some of the best supporters of a conservative vote. What basically we have is more the fear of a pastor than the legal issues. We have the fear of the pastor, who is more afraid of the donations and a small, maybe 10% of his fellowship that might complain or not like it. What we have also found in areas where the churches have been involved, I'll give you an example: Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, and Calvary Chapel, Temecula. Those are a couple of churches where the people are educated. The pastor integrates geopolitics, if it's natural, with his biblical teachings. He won't ignore issues like violations of religious liberty. He won't ignore issues such as the issue of abortion. They'll talk about it. Well, people from those churches and those fellowships have not only had people running for office, but also going door to door and, just like you said,
engaging,
getting out the vote. Because today, it's not who has the best policies. It's not who's articulate. You could be hiding in a basement. It's not about who is able to have anything that, like in the past, that this is a great agenda. This is a great person. This guy has integrity. It's nothing like that. It's who gets out the vote better.
Exactly.
And churches are some of the best equipped to be able to do that. You give me 5 to 6 mega churches in any district, and you'll flip that district, even if it's got an incumbent Democrat. You'll flip it to a conservative.
With the churches involved.
Yeah.
Three more quick questions for you. I think we got to wrap up. I know you have with the time limit. You talk about the upcoming marketing in the economic crisis. I might not be saying exactly what I read there, but there's an upcoming marketing crisis or economic crisis. You have a solution for that?
About the economic crisis that's coming up? Well,
do you think there is one? So there's a survival guide or something?
We do have an economic crisis. We are undoubtedly in this 2023.
Are we in it? Is it coming?
A recession, but the biggest plague is going to be a continuing inflation. And when you talk, Biden takes a victory lap that inflation went down from over 8% down to 7%. That is unsustainable. Everybody watching you now, William, knows when they go to the store, it's more like 12, 15, 20% inflation. Mm-hmm. They also know that it keeps going up and continues on. And people, their savings are disappearing. Their wages are not keeping up. If they're on fixed income, they're in bad shape. It is not something that's sustainable. And that's where we have to have dramatic economic reforms to stop this. Everybody has seen this whole stagflation now taking place, where it's a slowing economy. It's not growing. Wages are not increasing in the rate of inflation, and sometimes not at all. And new innovations are not appearing, and new capital is not being formed. and yet the prices are staying high. That's stagflation. Everybody has seen shrinkflation. William, that's when you go to the store,
right?
You buy a box of Cheerios, and you've got a box left over from 6 months ago, and you compare it to the box today, and it's shrunk. And yet
Exactly.
the price is the same or maybe even higher.
Or actually, it might be. Actually, it's bigger because it has more air in it.
Yeah, there you go.
So do you think that inflation is being calculated the same way they've calculated unemployment in the past, where they take out certain factors or they add in certain factors? We always hear, well, then, the unemployment rate went down, but that's because they weren't counting the people that were leaving the job market, so to speak. They keep saying, well, inflation's going down. Is that because they're not counting certain factors? Maybe they're saying, okay, we're only going to count gasoline now, and gasoline went down $1 a gallon, but now it's going back up. Do you think that is that what they're doing? Are they as a shell game?
It is a shell game. It changes. Biden changed what the stats would be for inflation after inflation really started taking off when he got into office, and so he changed the rules a bit on that. But basically, it's a category of items that they look at every single month, and they evaluate if they've gone up or down. But you can play with those numbers. It's not real world. Just like you said, one of those figures, for example, is the price of gas and oil. So when that goes down, you're going to have inflation going down, even though other things might be rising. So it's not a reliable indicator. The private economists do a better job, which are showing 12 to 13, 14%, depending upon the economists. But the government figures are not reliable. Not only that, because it's a bundle and because there's variables, you could have it go down to 7%, and then 2 months later go up to 8%, go down to 7%, then go up to 8.5%. It is not something that we can rely upon. But from an economic standpoint, from everybody who is paying bills, from everybody who it has to be able to make money, it is unsustainable. Okay. The Fed says it wants 2%. That even is too high.
People are tired of hearing it went down by 1% when they're paying 20%, 30% more for eggs. Last two questions. Sure. And freedom, I believe, is under attack in America.
Yes.
And a lot of people think I'm a conspiracy theorist for saying that. They're like, I can still walk the streets. I can still go buy what I want. I can do what I want. And I always say, no, there's other little things. In what way do you think that freedom is most under attack in America?
There's so many different fronts attacking our individual freedom. And so whatever the work your listener is in, their freedom is being attacked. If they have kids or grandkids in school, their freedom is being attacked. If they're on Twitter or Facebook, if they're watching the biased media, mainstream media, their freedoms are being attacked. And, it's really so extensive that our individual freedom is under assault. And we should be, as America, the freest society in the world. We have always been the beacon of hope for people worldwide of how to be able to have that individual freedom where I can do whatever I want as long as I'm not hurting anyone else. That I can raise my family as I want without the government telling me how to raise it. And that is not happening today.
I believe that our Constitution has stopped a lot of things that other countries' citizens could not stop in their countries because they did not have as free of a Constitution as we have. Last question. I always like to say I do believe that even though ideologically I'm on the right and I love to talk about all the right issues that are going to solve problems in our country, keep us free, help save this nation, I still believe that we as a country, the people of it, we are more united, on more things than we realize than what we're being divided on by the narratives in the media. what do you believe it unites us the most in our country?
I think the thing that unites us the most, quite frankly, is the idea of family and protecting of kids. I think that you can find a greater commonality among everyone of how we have to be able to have a family-friendly economy, and that our freedoms and extend completely to the family unit. And so I think that if somebody doesn't understand politics, doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand what's going on, they do understand their family and what's good for their family and what's needed for their family.
Craig, I got to tell you, that's the first time anybody has given that answer on my show. So you get a big star there for being the first one with that answer. Craig, I thank you very, very much for your time today. I really do. You've been a great person to bring on, and I think an integral part of what we need to spread not only the words of freedom in our country, but to be able to sound the alarm on what's going to happen if we don't wake up more people. And I'm always looking to bring on more people like you that is going to not only sound that alarm, but help solve problems. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, William. Great to be with you.
Any final words before I close out? I'm gonna talk to you off camera before we leave, but any final words before we close out?
No, I think that anybody who's watching your show is someone who should be learning and discovering, and that's why they're watching you. I encourage them, get one of the books, get the Christian Voter book, get the Deep State book. I guarantee you're going to learn something that you didn't know, and you'll see a unique perspective that I think you'll enjoy by reading the book.
At either electionforum.org or craighuey.com. Craig, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody else, please share the interview, share the podcast, find all the platforms it's on, CloutHub, William Wallis for America, also Facebook, William Wallis for America, or on any podcast app at William Wallis for America. Thank you so much and have a great day.